Well, hello, and thank you so much for tuning in to watch my Celery and Sit Ups webinar. Celery and Sit Ups, the two things that do not actually help us maintain the right control over our midlife weight gain once we get to around 45 or so. I hope that this will be an informative 45 minutes where you'll have some moments without it being particularly boring. So if you're not already doing so, sit down, snuggle up, make yourself a cup of tea, and off we go. I'd love to know from you, and if you're watching this live, then of course you can put it in the chat, and if you're watching it on catch up, then you can't. But have you noticed that you've put on weight around your waist over the last, couple of years, despite the fact you haven't done anything different, you haven't eaten anything differently, you've been doing the same sort of exercise? Have you noticed that that's something that's happening to you? Plenty of women have that issue. Okay, so let's go on to the next slide. You are in the right place if you are here live between 11:30 and 12:15. If you're on catch up, then that's great. There is an emergency exit, of course. If you're watching this on catch up, you can pause it and leave, and I will plan to leave about 15 minutes for questions at the end. Obviously, if you're watching this on catch up, you won't get the 15 minutes of questions. Have a cup of tea or your brunch or whatever you want to while you're watching this, but please do make sure you're on silent. And as always, it's important for me to tell you that this masterclass is being recorded, but the only bits that are recorded are the bits where I'm talking rather than when people are asking questions for confidentiality purposes. So you're in the right place watching the right masterclass if you're a woman probably over about 45. You may not actually be much over 45. You may actually have stumbled across this and thought, I need to know more. It may be that you don't recognize or even like the body that you live in anymore. Probably your confidence is either at an all-time low or it's definitely on the decline. Your confidence about your body and who you are and how you want to be. Maybe your clothes feel a bit too tight, or maybe you've actually gone into the lockdown stretchy everything. So you don't know your clothes are too tight because you're too scared to even put them on. And maybe you've put on weight, but you don't know why. But more importantly, you are so ready to do something, anything, to feel better about yourself. So this webinar, Celery and Sit Ups, is aiming to help you understand the real reason why women put on weight once they hit their mid-40s. I will, for those of you who are here live, be giving out 3 amazing prizes at the end. And as I said, there will be some question time at the end. And if you're here live and you've got questions, pop them in the chat box. And if you're not here live, if you're watching this on catch up and you've got a question, do find me on Facebook or Instagram. Facebook, I have a group, it's free. I do lots of coaching in there. Instagram is much more public. I'm a little bit nervous on Instagram, so I tend to put pretty pictures and talk about the things I feel very safe about. So Facebook's the place to find me if you really want to chat to me. So trying to avoid a growing waistline for those of us over 40-ish, 45, is not about looking good on Instagram. It's not about getting your crop tops out and showing off your abs to anybody. It's actually much more than that. Is much more about our health. You know, your life, your health at 40, 45 and over is a really good indicator of what your health's going to be like when you're older. So we're now focusing on our health and being able to live in the way that we want to live and do the sorts of things that we want to be able to do. It's about having the energy to live in the way that you want to live. If you've got grandchildren, to being able to run around after them, or children, perhaps, if your children are younger. It's about being able to put your luggage in the overhead locker. If you ever get on a plane again, lift your luggage out of the car, or your shopping, or the stuff you've got, because that lift and twist movement. Get your shoes from under the bed and get up without going, ooh, and groaning. And actually staying disease-free. Disease and injury-free. That's what this is all about. So who am I? I am Sam Palmer. I'm a menopause expert, lifestyle coach, fitness coach, and menopause warrior, I guess, is one of the words attributed to me. I've been in the menopause world for about 8 years, way before it became trendy or people talked about it. In fact, if I used the V word, vagina, on LinkedIn a few years ago, I was frowned upon. In fact, I came away from LinkedIn because I was too nervous. It's not something that was discussed comfortably. And how things have changed. I don't know if any of you caught the Davina McCall program last year where they talked about the menopause, and they lifted the lid on some of the menopause taboos. Well, I've been in that world for the last 8 years, talking, listening, sharing, embracing this message and trying to get people to be more open about how they feel. So I'm a dog lover. This is Elma, my cockapoo. I'm 57, 58 this year. I'm a nurse by training. I worked in intensive care with premature babies. I then worked as a teacher in further education for a while. And I've been a coach and a running coach specifically, working with women for a long time. But as I say, for the last 8 years, I've been focusing my fitness and my lifestyle coaching specifically in the world of the menopause. So let me just reiterate this. Menopause is not a disease. It's a life phase. Today's woman will live a third of her life in the menopause. I want to be in a really good third of my life. I don't know if you know, but the menopause is when you haven't had a period for a year, 12 months. When you haven't had a period for a year, that's the point at which you know, right, I'm now in the menopause. And many people have 10, 11 months, no period, and then bang, another period comes along and no, you're not quite there. So 12 months and a third of your life after that time. So we want it to be a really good time, don't we? So if you had woken up one morning and you'd Googled, how do I get a flat stomach? Because you looked down at this stomach that's big enough to have its own postcode. In about 0.63 seconds, you'll have 135 million results. And there'll be things that give you exercises that you can do. And there'll be shakes and smoothies and creams and things you can do, which make you go from day 1 looking like you're maybe 6 months pregnant to day 14 looking like a 21-year-old. And you know what? They are all utter rubbish. Most of it is utter rubbish. People are looking for a quick fix when they're looking for midlife weight loss. And for many of us, it's taken 45, 48, 51, 56 years to get to where we're at. And it doesn't go overnight, but it does go if you understand the whys that it got there and you understand the how to make it better. And that's what we're focusing on here. So stay. Don't go, because you want to know how. If you've got the why, you want to know how, don't you? So abdominal weight gain in midlife is largely due to 3 things. And if I was to ask you to put it into the chat, what would you say? You know, donuts, alcohol, eating too late at night. All of these things are possibly the things that come into your head. So you may be surprised to learn what they are. So here's the first one: stress. How many of you are stressed? I'm stressed, you're stressed, we're all stressed. We live a very stressful life. So what's stress got to do with this weight gain now in our 40s or 50s? I don't know how many of you have got maybe young adults or teenagers in your family. And you know that when your young adult or your teenager goes through a stressful situation, breaks up with a partner, has exams, boy, the weight drops off them. Do you remember it happening to you? I don't know, you go through relation breakups. Suddenly you're traumatized about the relationship, but boy, do you look good because the weight's dropped off you. Well, now, unfortunately, my friends, it's not like that. It's all very different. We've got stresses such as elderly parents or relatives, particularly if they are ill during this COVID pandemic time. We've got financial worries. Maybe worries because we've been furloughed, worries because we've been made redundant, worries because our kids are now going to university and there's costs that we didn't know about. There's all sorts of financial worries that may become a problem for us. Kids are leaving school and going on to university, or leaving university and going on and finding jobs. Illness of all types with our relatives, our family, our friends. You may find that you're in a stressful point in your career and you're not quite sure where that's going to go next. And maybe it's just that your lifestyle has changed. I don't know how many of you have got partners who may well have retired. Well, love them though you may, getting used to a new way of living, that brings its own levels of stress, let me tell you. So what's that got to do with our weight gain? I should have mentioned here, sandwich generation. Any of you almost only just postnatal? Quite a few of the people that I end up working with now really didn't have their babies very long ago. So they've got toddlers and play dates and elderly parents as well. They're juggling the two things. They are the sandwich generation, although I did hear some while ago, somebody describe it, in fact, as the panini generation, because a sandwich is nice and thick and a panini is squeezed really, really thin. So the panini generation. So to explain to you, so that you kind of get it, this stress thing, because you may think, I haven't actually got any stress. I'm going to tell you a story just like Jack and Ori. Remember that years ago? So here we are. There is a zebra down at a watering hole in a lovely hot country enjoying the sunshine, and he's having a drink at the watering hole, and he's pondering how long he's going to be there and maybe where his children are, or whatever you ponder when you're a zebra at the watering hole. And he has no stresses in his life at all until suddenly over his corner of his eye, he sees his big predator, the lion. Now, the lion is something that the zebra needs to be scared of on a day-to-day basis, because basically he is food for the lion. So when the zebra clocks the lion, various things happen in his body. Apart from him thinking, oh dear, or something like that, something scary is about to happen. His pupils will dilate. His heart rate will increase. His vessels will dilate to carry more blood around his body. And as he produces adrenaline and cortisol as a reaction to the terrifying thing that could be about to happen, he runs. And he runs and he runs and he runs and he runs. And if he's fast enough and lucky enough, he will escape or get away from that lion and end up behind a tree in the shade thinking, whew, that was close. But do you know what happens then to our friend the zebra? His pupils stop being dilated. His heart rate goes back to normal. His adrenaline and his cortisol levels slowly drop down. And he goes back to being as chilled as a cucumber again fairly quickly. We are not like a zebra. We have a notification on our phone. We have a telephone call that tells us somebody needs us. We have one of those calls from your mother-in-law that says something isn't working. We have an email that needs to be sent, a homework letter that needs to be replied to. All manner of lion types of challenges all through our day. And they never, ever stop. We never switch off from being that zebra who is being chased by a lion. So we are constantly under stress. And that is what plays havoc with our waistline, or one of the effects of that. And that is because when we are constantly under stress, our ability for our hormones, which are declining anyway, because we're in the perimenopause or menopause, to do what they're supposed to do, which keep and stay balanced, is now out of kilter. And we end up putting on weight around our middle. Would you say that you've been under quite a lot of stress over the last couple of years? Could that be something that you could pay attention to and see if the knock-on effect of that helps you? I suspect it could be. So I would then ask you to say, what can you do to reduce the stress in your life? First, identify it, but then reduce it. You know, self-care is not selfish. It's not selfish, because if the mothership goes down, everything goes down. So what could you say no to? What could you change now in your life that would alleviate a little bit of stress for you? Somebody wrote to me last week, because my fitness classes started again. It's the beginning of the term and everybody's looking to get back into a regular routine because they know how important fitness classes are. But it's a bit scary when you start fitness, even though you know that my fitness classes are dedicated to women in the menopause or in their midlife. It's still a bit scary. And she wrote to me and I told her she wanted to know about when the yoga class was, 6:30, beautiful twilight yoga. Oh no, she said, I can't do that. I'm getting my children's tea then. And I composed a reply to this lady, which said something to the effect of, your children are actually teenagers. They are quite capable of getting their own tea, you know, because when they go off to college or university or wherever they're going to do, they need to get able to get their own tea. And you need to do yoga far more than they need to stand while you watch and do their tea. In fact, I didn't send it. I thought, poor lady doesn't know me very well yet. And maybe you don't know me very well yet, but I guess I'm challenging you. What can you say no to? Is it constantly you that has to run people down to the station, which is less than a mile away? Why don't they walk? Why is it you that gets up so you can't do something for half an hour in the morning, take yourself off for a walk or something? And this is quite a big change of our brain space, because we've been used for 45, 50, 56 years or whatever it is to being the yes woman, the person who says, yes, I'll do that. Yes, 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 that's fine. And I'm suggesting you learn to say no. It's quite hard. What could you say no to? And then the next thing that affects our weight gain is our sleep. Now, you may not have expected that I'd say that. Sleep, what's that got to do with it? If you took a look at 100 people all standing in a row and they all said to you they slept really badly, I suspect most of them, if they are our age, will be carrying a bit too much weight. Because when we don't sleep very well, our hunger hormones are all out of whack. What does that mean? So let's just talk about why you don't sleep. So I'm going to ask you, which one of these would you say yes to? Do you have trouble going to sleep? Do you wake up for no reason? Do night sweats wake you up? Or perhaps do you wake up to go to the toilet? In fact, often we wake up to go to the toilet, then we realize we're hot and sweaty. Or do you sleep, but when you're waking up in the morning, you're still exhausted? Is there one of those or more that you can actually say, yeah, that's definitely me? Because there are different reasons why we may not be sleeping particularly well. So which one of those might you say yes to? Now, reduced estrogen, our estrogen is declining in the perimenopause, will lead to, for many people, an increase in our anxiety levels, possibly joint pain. But the primary thing that people associate it with is waking up in the night, having the nighttime equivalent of a hot flush, which is called a night sweat. Is that something you've noticed? Some of the people that I've worked with have had to change the whole bed twice in the night. Well, that's not very conducive to a nice bedtime arrangement or relationship with the person you share your bed with. It's highly embarrassing. It's very disruptive. So night sweats due to the reduced estrogen are a big thing, but there is something you can do about it. And then on the other side of the coin, there's reduced progesterone. So these are the two hormones that go down in our perimenopause. Now, when your progesterone is going down, progesterone is a little bit like the drug that calms you down, soothes you and smooths everything out. And if your progesterone is low, it's harder to get to sleep and stay asleep. Now, sometimes you've got reduced estrogen and progesterone. Well, that's a bit of a nightmare, isn't it? And then you may be adding to your issues by doing this. So here I would ask you, is this you? Do you and your bed partner, or is it just you? Do you sit in bed with some kind of a screen? Do you look at your emails or Pinterest, Amazon, shopping, what sales are on, quick search on Facebook, what's going on Instagram? There is, in fact, some new research that says that the blue light emitted from screens, if we're watching something, is less of a problem than we once thought it was for our sleep. But even if it's a bit of a problem, there is something you can press on your phone to reduce the screen light. There's I think it's in settings somewhere. And a Kindle, if you're reading a book on a Kindle, is designed not to emit that blue light. But more importantly, if you are the sort of person who's triggered by last pair of shoes in the sale, that's the stress and the zebra. Really want those shoes. I really want them in the sale. Quick, I need to go and get my bank card. You can feel the anxiety going up. If you're the sort of person who's affected by seeing something on Facebook that you don't want to see, somebody with somebody abroad, somebody in a beautiful bikini, and you don't look like that, then that's going to be triggering you and affecting your sleep. So trying to avoid any kind of screen at night is a really good idea. Other things to avoid, apart from that screen in the middle of the screen, are caffeine. Now, you may or may not be, as far as you're concerned, a caffeine sensitive person. If you are caffeine sensitive, any kind of caffeine after around somewhere between 12 o'clock and 3 o'clock, 12 o'clock midday and 3 o'clock in the afternoon, may be enough to trigger a lack of sleep response for you. If you're not caffeine sensitive, I would still say try and avoid it much after 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, because it is a stimulus and we don't want a stimulus. One of the tips that I would say to you is put yourself to bed like a toddler. Bring the noise levels down. Turn the lighting down. Talk to yourself gently. That means listen to things that are gentle. Try and think about that. And you'd never give a toddler a cup of coffee, would you, at night? And you'd never give a toddler a glass of wine. Now, alcohol is one of those things that many people think, well, that will help me sleep. Well, you know what? It does for about half an hour. And then it's likely, you probably noticed this, if you drink alcohol now, that you wake up in the night having a hot flush, because alcohol just doesn't work for you in the same way that it used to. And so many people who are struggling with their sleep, I suggest they really try and reduce their alcohol consumption rather than using it as a crutch to help them get to sleep. They cut it out and we look at other ways. So I'll ask you, how good is your nighttime routine? Do you stick to these things, or is there something that you could change? So I mentioned to you the hormones and your hunger levels with sleep and weight gain. Now, there are two particular hormones that you may or may not have heard of. One is called leptin and one is called ghrelin. And we need both of these hormones because they both carry out different things. Leptin is the hormone that tells you you are full. Now, one of the ways I remember this is that leptin has the same starting letter as Labradors. And I don't know if any of you have got a Labrador, but have you ever had a Labrador that's ever said, no, I'm full? Labradors eat anything that doesn't move. Steering wheels, food, dog poo, anything they can get hold of. And that's because Labradors, I assume, don't have very much leptin. They don't have that thing that says, nah, you're full. I suspect the last time you really noticed that leptin going through the roof was on Christmas Day, when after your Christmas meal, you thought, oh my gosh, I've eaten enough for a week. And that's because your leptin levels are high, as they should be. Now, if you don't sleep, your body doesn't produce leptin in the same way. So you become a bit more like a Labrador and you just get so that you want to eat and eat and eat. Your cravings for food continue. You notice that? Now, conversely, ghrelin, think of a grumbling tummy. If you're watching this and you haven't had anything to eat for the last few hours, is your tummy grumbling? So ghrelin is the hormone that's produced when your body's starting to say to you, it's time to eat. It's time to eat. You haven't eaten for a few hours. So when you get that rumbling tummy feeling, that's because your body's producing this ghrelin. And it needs to produce just about the right amount, doesn't it? Now, if you don't sleep, that ghrelin production can actually go into overproduction. And suddenly you're constantly hungry. You're constantly looking for more food and you're never full. You can see why, can't you? It's a bit of a vicious circle going round and round and round. Leptin, ghrelin, leptin, ghrelin, leptin, ghrelin. And so you have to break that cycle somehow. And by working on your sleep, that's one of the ways to do it. I have a friend who used to struggle so much that she would make herself a sandwich and cover it with cling film and put it by her bed at night because she would wake up hungry. And it was only when we got on top of her sleep and we got her sleeping better and doing all sorts of other things better with my help that actually she managed to break that cycle. So I promised that I would give you 5 of my top, probably about 25 sleep solutions. We haven't got time for 25 here today, but here are my top 5. And you probably know all of them, but I'm saying to you, which of them do you do? You know what? Accountability is one of the things that's really important about having a coach. You can read all of this stuff everywhere. You can read, you can see me say it, but sometimes actually having somebody to whom you are accountable to to say, yeah, I've done that, I've done that, I've done that. That's how we start to form new habits. So exercise, walking every day is fantastic. 10,000 steps is the daily amount that we are suggested to get. When I work with people, I start with what they're at, where they're at, and then we go up slowly. Because if you're somebody who has a desk-based job, I can almost promise you that if you sit behind a laptop every day, all day, you'll probably do about 3,000 steps. Worth having a look back on your phone or your Fitbit or whatever it is that you wear and look at your step count. How many steps are you getting a day? The other thing that I prescribe, if you like, is that you get outside every day for 20 minutes. Now, if you can get outside walking, that's great. If you can get outside before 3 o'clock, that's great. But one of the great joys in life is taking just a little bit of minutes of time for yourself. So if it's cold in the mornings, but it's bright and sunny, put a blanket around you, drag your duvet downstairs, or even just sit by the window and have that morning cuppa. Listen to the birds, get the light in through your eyes, and just savor that moment. One of the reasons why we need so many holidays is because we don't take enough holiday every day. We feel guilty if we sit on the sofa and read a book. We feel guilty if we take time to do something that's just for us, something that is not actually going to do anybody any good except for us. We have a lot of guilt, women, don't we? So get outside for 20 minutes every day. Reducing your screen time, as I mentioned earlier. Now, an Epsom salt bath, it turns out that our grandparents were right. Epsom salts are made up of magnesium, and magnesium is a little bit similar to progesterone in that it calms things down. So if you're somebody who struggles with joint pain and difficulty sleeping, having an Epsom salt bath might be the something that just makes things a little bit easier. And as I mentioned, reducing alcohol. So there's 5 of my top solutions. Now, this lady, Liz, came to me right at the beginning of lockdown, struggling with her sleep, struggling with weight gain. Her name was Liz. We called her Lockdown Liz for a while. She was lacking any kind of motivation to exercise. She said her clothes were uncomfortable. She didn't have any energy. And if you do look at the scales, and it's a good idea not to necessarily pay attention to the scales all the time, she didn't like the number that she saw. And I don't know if you can identify with any of that. And so Liz and I worked together over a period of time. And this is what she said she felt once she had done that work with me. She was stronger. She had more energy. And it had made a big difference to her life. She had noticed that her body shape had changed. And yes, she'd lost weight. But one of the things that's really interesting is that when we work with each other in our midlife, it's not about trying to achieve a particular goal anymore. It's about how you feel. If you want support to help you feel better, then that's something that I can do. This was Kim, addicted to sugar, particularly cream tea, she told me. And the sugar in her diet was giving her constant headaches. She said that she had had a headache every day for the last 10 years, and she had not been able to find a way of getting rid of these headaches. As a result of it, she hated her body. And as you're probably not going to be surprised about, she had no energy and no sleep. And once again, simple, sustainable changes that I put her on meant that she lost a lot of weight, but more importantly, she felt healthier than she had in ages. Her headaches disappeared, which I'm not surprised about. She lost 2 stone in weight. Kim was a lot happier just by putting these tiny little things into place. I haven't mentioned anything to you about calories or restriction or anything. She just started making small changes. And then this is another friend of mine, Michelle, who was trying to do what she felt was the right thing to do. And actually, hopefully, without going out of turn, everything Michelle was doing was wrong. And some of the things I see people being advised to do to get on top of their weight gain in midlife, things like intermittent fasting, don't eat for 16 hours, don't do this, eat this, drink this, take this shake. It's all wrong. And what ends up happening is that person gets more stressed, and you know what that does. They end up putting on more weight, they get more joint pain, less sleep, and so it becomes a vicious cycle. And she said everything she was doing was making things worse rather than better. And again, just breaking that cycle was the thing that really, really helped Michelle. Look how happy she looks there. So the third part of the wheel, if you've been following me on Instagram or social media or of any description, it won't be a surprise to you that movement is a big part of this weight control. Notice I use the word movement, not exercise. So let me explain why that is. Years ago, 10, 15 years ago, your body was a little bit like that racing car. It needed a lot of fuel to make it go. And it needed a lot of fuel because you had a lot more muscle on board, and your day-to-day life was probably very different. But over time, automatically with age, we become less muscly. We become more like that little Fiat 126 instead of like a racing car. And that muscle decline is called sarcopenia, but it's totally reversible. So if you have been doing the kind of movement which has not been building or maintaining muscle over the last 5 or 10 years, you will have been eating the same amount of food as you've been eating for the last 5 or 10 years, but your engine doesn't need the same amount of petrol anymore. Your muscles aren't using up the same amount of calories. Therefore, when you were able to eat 1,800 calories a day and not notice any weight gain, you're now potentially eating the same amount of calories and you are noticing weight gain. Well, I don't know about you, but there's 2 ways that you can approach this. You can look at your calories and drastically reduce them, which I don't think is any fun for anybody, or you can increase some of your muscle and start to look at some of the wasted calories and end up with a happy medium that feels doable and still allows you to go out for dinner and have meals out with friends and do all the things that make life pleasurable. So what we don't want is for those extra calories to end up being laid around your stomach. And that's not only because it makes you feel uncomfortable, lack of confidence, as we mentioned at the beginning, uncomfortable in your clothes. It's because there are other things that are dangerous about that weight gain as well. So it would be very wrong of me to say that this is all just about confidence. There are some knock-on effects of this weight gain, which I'm going to tell you about in a minute. But what I also wanted to talk about, so as well as the muscles, and we can talk about growing your muscles in other ways another time, because you know that I do my fitness classes. But this is something that everybody can think about, and that is your non-exercise activity thermogenesis. That's your NEAT. Now, you may have heard this term before. Basically, it's the amount of movement that you're doing during the day that isn't by going to an exercise class, and it's not from eating or just sort of sleeping or existence. It's all the other stuff that you do. So you're walking around the garden or walking around the block or walking from one floor to another to go to the toilet. The amount of fidgeting you might do with your feet or your knees under the desk or wherever you fidget. My husband fidgets a lot. Perhaps the amount of gardening you do, or typing or cleaning or sweeping or any of those things, shopping, lifting it in and out of the car. All of that stuff. You know what? Doing a workout can probably burn off somewhere between 4 to maybe 8% of your day's calories, whereas your NEAT can burn up about 60%. So you can see that it's just as important for you to be active during the day somehow as it is for you to be doing regular exercise. The 2 things become non-negotiable, and you can't really separate one from another. I often use the term armchair athlete, and that's a description of somebody who does 2 or 3 workouts a week, maybe for 40 minutes, but the rest of the week, they're sitting in the chair. They're chair-shaped. Are you an armchair athlete? So could you look at some of your day-to-day stuff? Could you say, right, let's have a walking meeting with your colleagues? Could you say, I'm going to stand up whenever I'm on the phone? Could you have a standing desk at work? what could you do to change things to mean that your NEAT goes up a little bit more? So we did mention walking within the sleep thing, and walking and how it's beneficial. So I just thought I'd quickly cover this a little bit. I mentioned 10,000 steps every day. If you are only doing that 3,500, you're now going to be triggered to think, what can I do to try and increase that? So if it's 3,000 or 4,000, see if you can increase it by just about 10% over the next 2 or 3 weeks. And then when you get to comfortably up to, I don't know, 4,500, maybe, if you've managed to get to there, then what can you do? What workouts can you do with me, which might increase your steps? How many more friends could you meet just once a week and increase your steps? Think about the things that would work for you. Now, one of the questions that people often ask me is, what about our mother or our grandmother? Because sometimes you do see, and I do quite a lot of talking now to corporate organizations. If you want me to come and talk to your business, I'm very happy to. Workplaces have a menopause policy, and they get people like me to come in and not necessarily talk about where the fan needs to go at work or the health and safety guidelines, but how to support the employees in the workplace. And sometimes elderly members of staff, I've said, well, it was fine for us, they should just get on with it. Well, actually, our parents and our grandparents lived a very different life. They didn't have the tools at home to help them do the kind of stuff we all have to do in the house. They didn't have a Henry. They beat their carpets or their rugs outside. They may have had a Bissell. Do you remember a Bissell from when you were a child? This thing you pushed up and down. Well, there's quite a lot of arm exercise that goes on. They picked out the coal from the coal bunker and they put it in the coal in the fire. So that was lifting, twisting, moving. Their activity was generally greater. They probably didn't have 2 cars. They may not even have had 1 car. So they may well have been on a bike, or Shanks's pony, I think my granny called it, walking around the place. And they certainly didn't have screens. They would write a letter and go and post it in a post box. The way that they lived their life was very different. They certainly didn't have Dunkin' Donuts. I know that. My granny used to make the most amazing meringues, but they were a treat. They were something you had at the weekend when we went to see her. Cakes were a weekend treat. It wasn't a day-to-day thing. We didn't have Coca-Cola, lemonade. We used to go to the pub as a big treat, and maybe we'd have a Fanta and it would be given to us in a paper straw, which would go soggy. Do you remember that? So soft and fizzy drinks weren't there. And of course, McDonald's, all of those fast foods weren't on the corner. It was meat and 2 veg. And so their lives were very different. They didn't have the same amount of stresses. Now, it would be wrong to say they didn't have any stress. They certainly did, but the stresses were very different. So that's why our grandparents and possibly our parents may have sailed through the menopause, or maybe they just didn't tell anybody. My vagina's dry. I'm sore. I feel like shit. I'm anxious. I'm worried. I've got tinnitus. My legs itch. Maybe they just didn't tell anybody. So coming back to those dangers about the midlife weight gain, I don't want to bang on about this too much, but I will just highlight this to you. Obesity, diabetes, and high blood pressure are much more likely to be a problem for you if your waist is more than 32 inches. I have a little tape measure on my desk, and it's one of the things that I get people to think about if they're looking at whether or not they're in a dangerous situation. Is your waist more than 32 inches? You might like to measure it, because if it is, it would be wrong to completely ignore this element of this midlife weight gain as something which can impact on our health and our fitness in the time we've got ahead of us. Heart disease becomes much more prevalent in women over 60 because we're no longer protected by our estrogen. So changing the way you exercise so that you've got some cardiac exercise, changing some of the foods you eat, avoiding some of those very high fat things becomes important. And that's why this weight control thing is important. Women who gain more than 1.5 stone increase their risk of breast cancer by about 20%. People often talk about HRT, which I'm on and I'm a huge advocate of if that's something you want to do. They talk about the risks of HRT without realizing that in fact, living the way that they do, they're increasing their risk of some carcinomas by not paying attention to their food and their obesity. So we need an all-round approach. I don't want to stand here and preach or lead from a place of fear, but we do need the knowledge to take some action. If that's what we're going to do, take action on this. 1 in 3 women over 50 may suffer from a hip fracture as a result of falling, because their bones are thinner. And I don't know if you know, or if you've had the experience, or perhaps with an elderly person in your family, but when an elderly person gets a hip fracture, if they end up in hospital being immovable, they often end up getting chest infections. And then with a chest infection, often comes death from that chest infection. So it's a scary thing. 61% of women in perimenopause have sleep issues, and that can be affected by your lack of by obesity. And 18% of women will suffer from achy shoulders, knees, and joint pain at some time. And of course, that's exacerbated by being overweight as well. So there's some really good reasons to get on top of this. Nothing to do with how good you look in a bikini. So let's just recap there. Movement takes in exercise, but it also takes in your daily movement. Your sleep, what could you do to change that? Your stress levels, what could you do to change that? It may be on reflection through these that I've said some things that have made you think, actually, yeah, you're right. I have had low-grade anxiety for some time. My confidence has gone. I've stopped doing things that I used to do without worrying about it at all. You may think, exercise, flipping it, I really can hardly get up, let alone have the energy or the motivation to exercise. And it may be that I've triggered some thoughts in you here that you didn't understand were even part of the perimenopause. You're actually just starting to understand your changing body. And if you understand your changing body, you have then got the ability to put the tools in a toolkit to do something about it. Now, I do have to share this with one of my long-standing members. This lady is called Jo. She has allowed me to share this with you. Jo came to me a couple of years ago, and she said, this is not my words, that she was fat and frumpy. There she is in the blue suit. And without putting Jo on a diet, but introducing the right kind of exercise, the right kinds of foods, eating more. Jo had to eat more, changing her fluid levels. Jo, my goodness, doesn't she look amazing? She lost 24 pounds, but more importantly, 4.5 inches from her waist and her hips. She said that she feels healthier and stronger. Her whole life has changed, but Jo had the incentive and the willingness to do it, but she needed support. She needed that accountability. And that's where I came in. So if it's okay with you now, I'm going to tell you how potentially I could help you if that's something that you're up for. If you don't need any help, feel free to stop this. But if you're thinking, well, I don't know, actually, I have tried this and I have tried that and I tried the other and none of that worked, maybe just hang on in for another 5 minutes or so. I think, firstly, having somebody on your side, in your camp, as it were, who understands what it's like to be in the perimenopause or menopause is very different from having a PT who's 15 years younger than you, who, despite how caring they are, they don't understand what it's like to feel like you're feeling like. So they're never going to say, actually, today is a day you need to rest. Today's not a day to push. Also, having a series of achievable tasks. In our younger days, we had these big challenges. I'm going to run a marathon. I'm going to do a 10K or whatever. Our tasks now need to be tiny so that you can tick them off and achieve them. Tiny something like, can you unsubscribe from 5 emails this week? That will stop the noise in your head. That will reduce your stress. There you are. I've just shared with you one of the tasks you might do. And then having a plan to follow that's designed for you, rather than for somebody else. When I work with people, I help them work out which of the 3 areas is really their focus. And it's generally one of 3 areas. So it's either getting back to being fit again. I used to be fit. I loved that feeling of fitness. I need a plan that gets me back to doing regular exercise. Or it may be, I am so stressed and frazzled. I'm biting everybody's head off. I'm crying all the time. I want a plan that helps me deal with that. Or it could be, I like food. I'm feeding a family. I'm just eating too much and I'm eating the wrong crap. And I want somebody to tell me, not that I can't eat that, but how about try to eat that and try to eat that. Things that will work with the family as well. So if you're looking for a plan that's your plan, then I can help that. Now, I've already mentioned accountability. So you could go away and do all of this. I could send you an email. You could pay me loads of money. I could send you an email and off you could tottle. And you know what? You wouldn't do it because you haven't done it now. So a Zoom call where you zoom in, you come in every week and I ask you, how are you doing with that week? Week 1, how are you doing? How are you doing? How are you doing? Because accountability matters. And then how about this? Imagine if I said to you, I would open up my little black book of the top midlife experts in the UK, because that's now, I'm proud to say, where I'm at. I am known as one of the top fitness menopause experts in the UK. That's a nice thing to be able to say. And I work with guts people, hormone people, anxiety people, people who can help you as well as me. How would it be that you would have access to that little black book, both masterclasses that have already happened, but the ones that are come? That's what you'd get if you signed up for me. So that's what I would tell you you'd get. But what would the girls who have done the program say? Because maybe that's far more important. Somebody said that program was life-changing. I really enjoyed the accountability and mentoring and the support and advice. Somebody said, I loved the fact that there was no doom and gloom. If you Google menopause, you see all sorts of women looking really doom and gloomy. And it's all about the awful things that are going to happen. Well, hell, I want a good sex life. I want to be happy. I want to be joyful in my relationships. I want to laugh and smile. And you do too. You don't want it to be doom and gloom, but you do want it to be science and research based. So I'm not going to go and tell you to put something out on the lawn, which is going to absorb the moon's rays and make you feel amazing. I may take you into the edge of your comfort zone and know that the moon might affect how you're feeling, but I'm not going to take you into claptrap. So you're spending money on supplements that you don't need to spend. Since the pandemic, my work has been fully online. So if you are on the other side of the world, if you're in the UK, if you're in Ireland or anywhere else in Europe, I can help you. Now, obviously, if you're out of the UK time zone, everything that I do is accessible in my time zone or on catch up. So that's not a problem. And I thought that that would be worth sharing with you. And of course, doable steps, small doable steps. So instead of roller coasting from one thing to another, you get to a place of stability where you think, I know what's going to happen. I'm following a plan. And certainly for the next 12 weeks, I'm going to be completely stable. This is a bit like learning to drive. So you take 12 weeks to learn to drive, or 12 weeks with me. And then after you've learned to drive, yeah, great. Now we can use those skills and stay as a driver and get better. And instead of being confused about all the advice you've read over time, finally, you complete the menopause symptom tracker with me. You get the answers to your questions and you go from being confused to being completely clear and somebody there to answer your questions. You go from battling on your own, I guess, to feeling supported. You come along to a weekly meeting with a problem about something, and if I can't answer it, the other girls in the group will. It's lovely being part of a friendship group where everybody's got the same aim, the same issues, and the highs and lows are the same. And that's a really strong part of this Move Over Menopause course that I offer, a 12-week course that's online. I think one of the important things is that if you're constantly craving food, how do we break out of those cravings and stop being hungry? And I've mentioned to you the hormones that go up and down. So if you get the midlife munchies in the afternoon when your energy levels are really waning, wouldn't it be nice to know how to make a small, probably chocolate, because I love chocolate, how to make a small sweet something that would really help you to get through that point and ready for supper. I'm actually, if you join this program, you'll probably be quite surprised. I'm probably going to tell you to eat more. more and more frequently. I'm never really going to tell you to eat less food. I'm going to get you eating more of the stuff that will keep you satisfied. I'll also give you some tips if you do have cravings to get over them. So instead of being limited to the way you live your life and how much energy you've got, instead of being limited to only being able to do certain things on certain days, you'll actually open up to having a wealth of possibilities for exercise, a wealth of possibilities for things that you want to do because you suddenly feel confident again. You'll feel confident to wear the clothes that you haven't worn for a while, a wealth of possibilities having been with me for 12 weeks. So if you're still interested and you'd like to know a little bit more about this, challenges, are you interested in the hydration challenge? That's one of the small sustainable changes. Are you interested in the alcohol challenge? Probably not. Are you interested in the vegetable challenge and the sleep better challenge? So you can see at no point am I going to take you into a challenge that you're going to think, nah, that's not for me. They're all real doable things, aren't they? If you're still watching here. So what can you do here? You could take your phone, open the camera app on your phone and hover over this QR code and wonder at my technical abilities, because that QR code will open the page where I can tell you a bit more about the Move Over Menopause course. This course starts this time on the 17th of January. If you happen to watch this at another time, then you'll be taken to a website with the next date, but the next starting date is the 17th of January. I have still got some spaces available. I only take a limited amount of people because I really want to get to know you. And as I said to you, you have a one-to-one at the beginning where we work out what are you focusing on. And I can only do that with a certain amount of people. I don't want thousands of clients that I don't get to know. I don't work in that way. The nurse in me doesn't tick that box. So if you're interested in knowing more, then screenshot this or hover over this and you can have a look. And I guess the best thing to do is to book a discovery call. You will be able to book a call with me from that link. Book a discovery call and ask me all the questions you've got. If you don't like me, you're never going to want to work with me. And if you do think, well, actually, she's quite relatable, but I've got some questions, I work full time, how does it work, etc., then you can ask me questions. Now, the program is £895, but that's an investment for a lifetime. It's not really an investment that kind of wears out. That would give you the skills to change the way you live and you eat and you move forever. So whilst it's an investment now, I guess I'll ask you, are you worth that investment? We spend £50, £100 willy-nilly quite happily, and that's a short-term commitment. And what are you left with? Whereas having invested in something that's 12 weeks and you get the tools, that's a long-term investment. Now, at the end of this webinar, 3 lucky people will have won the prizes, and those will go out by email. But everybody who has watched this webinar will have got my free exercise planner. And if nothing else, I would love to engage you in thinking about your exercise and jotting down in a planner when you're going to do what. Because as soon as we put something down on a piece of paper, that's when it becomes reality. As soon as you put something down, your brain stops seeing it as a potential and starts seeing it as a possibility. So I'll leave you with that thought. If you were a smoker yesterday and today you've given up smoking, you don't say, yes, I'm not a smoker anymore. You say, I don't smoke. If yesterday you were feeling anxious, challenged, hot, overweight, and you didn't know what to do about it, today you might say, I'm in control. The question is, how are you in control? I really hope that you've enjoyed this webinar, this masterclass, that you'll stay in touch with me and you'll enjoy the stuff I put out for you and through Facebook or through Instagram. Thank you for watching. I would love to have a chat with you if you'd like me to help you in any way in the future. And if not, I look forward to seeing you again sometime soon. Thank you and bye-bye.